Welcome to Shelby DIY at Fabulous Finishes. We're here for another show today, and today what we're going to work on is an old wrought iron set that actually was in my family when I was a kid, and it's gone through other siblings, and there's been a couple coats of paint that were added on it, and now I've reacquired this set to do something with, and then we'll probably sell it. And thought it was a good example for the show today because typically with all the paints that you see with the easy DIY paints, they're no sanding, no stripping, no priming, everything just bonds and it's easy and you're all done. But with projects like this, painting on metal, the paints will bond and we won't have to strip them or prime them, which is key. But you have to do some prep with the sanding because these you'll be able to see when we're cleaning the first one, they have paint that's chipping off of them. And the paint that we use isn't going to act like a glue and bond that. You got to do extra prep work when you're going to try to save a project like this. But it's a pretty cool set, and once we get it painted, it would be worth the work. And even if it has a little bit of texture on it, it's a nice way to salvage it. So what we're going to do with this first chair, I kind of broke it into stages so we can see the process as we go. This one has not been cleaned or prepped yet, and typically we would just take like a simple green, you know, spick and span, you know, a cleaning agent like that, and we would, you know, get the whole thing, wipe it down. I'm actually going to put gloves on because I don't like the creepy stuff like this. But usually you could just do a good scrubbing on a piece. This has been outdoor, so it's got like some old dirt and stuff. But if you can look closely here, you can see this paint that's just ready to come right off, okay? So that's the part where I have to stop and say, okay, just a soapy rag and some simple green or spick and span isn't gonna do it because you're just gonna sit on this once we put a pretty finish on it, and the pretty finish is gonna come right off. So save yourself the grief and get yourself, I like little scraping tools. You can use little wire brushes, but you know, I'm just gonna go with this until I can see that nothing else is really chipping off. Now, if you're real particular about your projects, you could take quite a bit of time with this and, you know, get a real heavy grit, like a 100 grit sandpaper, and, you know, kind of get your edges a little bit. The key is when you feel it, you just want to make sure everything else is kind of down. You know, you don't have like hooks where the minute you hit it again, it chips and flakes right into your face, okay? I just noticed most of the areas were along here. Everything else looks pretty good. So, and here it's all good, but just do a check on your piece, you know, when it is metal, and, you know, just pull something along like that just to get all of your icky stuff off. And then do a nice, you know, you could get, I'd probably wet my rag actually, you know, take like a wet rag and, you know, clean it down good and then wait for it to dry and you could begin your painting process. So, you know, this really is key. You know, you want to do proper prep before you use any of these paints because you don't want to put the time and effort into it or the money for the products. You know, you want a nice project that's complete when it's done. So that would be your prep. This one I did yesterday, and it's all pretty set to go. This was clean, even though it has a little bit of a grungy look to it. And I wanted to do like a rubbed bronzy kind of finish on this, just because you see that a lot on outdoor furniture. And it would have been nice to use like the smoother reclaimed paint that bonds underneath the metal, but because it has the chipping and, you know, these elements of an uneven surface, again, I'm going to use that thicker paint that tends to hide that a little bit and mask it. So I'm going to use the black, and that'll be the base paint that we use. Okay, and this is that same one by Caramel Colors, okay? And I got my thick black paint. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start painting. And areas where, you know, it's a little bit heavier or chippy, you know, if I wanted to go thinner, you know, I could. this already has a little bit of texture from all those years of paint anyway. So it's not like I have to put that paint on real heavy. But, you know, to get it into all those little cracks and crevices, you want to use these nice little chip brushes where you got the natural bristle and it gives you that good bounce. And make sure it gets jammed into all your surfaces. And this will be easy enough to see if you're missing areas, because the black versus like that light color, you can kind of spot it instantly when you turn around and you see that you missed something. So, you know, give it a once over once you get it done. Make sure it's all on there. And it'll take, you know, usually if you're using this thicker paint, you're not putting it on super thick, you know, it'd probably take about 3-4 hours if you were in a hurry to get your project done. I'd say estimate probably about 3 or 4 hours for the base coat here to dry. And then you could move on to your next step. Now, I mean, if you wanted your set black and you wanted it a little bit, you know, hammered like this, you could just do, gosh, even one coat if you got it coated well, or maybe a quick second coat. And, you know, get either the indoor-outdoor sealer or get some other type of sealer that had outdoor protection, put it over it, and you'd have a brand new set that way. But we're going to jazz it up a little bit with the metallic, just because it's pretty. And then we're going to do something fun on the glass tabletop so it kind of ties in. The piece has some nice little details. So I think you get the idea with this on how you'd have to kind of go about, cover the whole thing. It was easier to take the seats off the pads. These chairs obviously have seat pads. If they didn't, I probably would have kept the set for myself, but I'm not into the seat pads and having to take them off and bring them in the house. Okay, so now we have a magical chair that's got the black base coat on and it's all nice and dry, which is awesome. And what I'm going to take here is it's just a metallic paint. Now, metallic paints can't, these are paints that are more acrylic based, and they're not the paints that are no sanding, no stripping, no priming. They stick to everything. They don't. They need a good primer base underneath. So I could never just take a metallic and put it over that metal chair. But once I have a nice base underneath, then they're good to use. And with this one, what I did was, we have a couple different brands here that we carry. I didn't want to just do the bronze, so what I did was I mixed a couple colors together. But you know, you get a little bit on your brush, and super easy. You could have your kids help you with this. In fact, I would probably sit in a nice little loungy chair and supervise them and make them do this. And you know, if you brush, if you don't have much on your brush, and you just do a light, where you keep your brush pretty even to the surface, and you do that scraping kind of motion, you can leave some of that black coming through. Maybe you like that look better than covering it solid. We did something kind of like this on a chair, one of the first shows we did on a wooden chair, and we kind of talked about the same thing. But when this dries, I'm going to take that little bit of sandpaper, and I'm not going to want to do a lot of heavy scraping because, you know, I don't want to get down to those metal ridges. But I am going to pop a little bit of that black before I do a glaze on it. So again, the paints are so versatile, you really can use them any way you want. You know, if you want to leave some of that black coming through, you can. If you want to really coat it and have it heavy, you can do that too. If you wanted to introduce another color, maybe if I had a silver right here and I brushed that in, that would give a different look. So that's kind of where you got to go with what you want to do there. So this would be more the solid. And again, I would go all the way around, make sure I get everything, look underneath so that my whole surface is covered. Okay. And then with this one, what I would do is if I did the black, let's say in the morning, and then I did the metallic after, I'd let it sit, let it dry for the rest of the day, and then, you know, restart your project in the morning, because that's a good way to do it. Let it dry good. And then you end up with this chair. Okay, so this has everything covered. It's got my texture, it's got my metallic, it's been dry for a day. And you know, like I said, I'm going to take a little bit of sandpaper on this. I'm just going to take like a 180 grit, just to lightly scuff, and I'm not going to go everywhere, but I'm gonna hit some of this here, and it's going to make it look cloudy, and you're not going to be able to tell quite what's going on, but just want a little bit of that to come through where it looks a little worn. You can go around and lightly hit it if you don't want to do that. This is completely optional. You don't have to do any sanding at all if you don't like to sand. And here and there you might pull up a little pop of a light color, you know, if you're catching something that's coming through from the base, but you know, for me, it all kind of pulls together in the final finish, so that doesn't concern me. If you're the kind of person where you want everything to look perfectly one color or the other, then don't even bother doing a little bit of sandpaper. Okay. So I'm going to get this set like this. I'd go around my whole piece. This wouldn't take that long. When I get each chair done, I would just take a dry rag. You don't need tacky cloth or anything high-tech like that. You know, clean it off good. Move on to your next chair. Okay. And then what I would do at this point, now again, you could stop here and just put a top coat on it and you'd be good to go. But I always like over the metallics, kind of popping them with a glaze. What it does is it just gives a little more richness to the color. And on the bronzes, I like to use black glaze. So this is just a water-based black glaze that we have here. And it goes over the paints that we have, goes over the metallics nicely. And another reason for waiting a day when you have the metallic dry and then you wait till the next day, it's just easier to put a glaze on it so that you don't kind of go right through the metallic and reactivate it. So for glazing, what you would really need is just, you know, another brush. You'd need your glaze and then a couple soft cloths like this. And your goal is just to kind of coat your whole piece. And you could just do one section at a time. So I'm not going to put this on the whole chair because detail like this takes a bit to get the product on. Not like you can just schlep it out in a minute. And glazes will start to set up a little bit. So I'll just, for these chairs, what I would do is I would get it on the front. Oh, I just spattered myself. Like on these open grills. And I would also get it on the back because it's going to push through both ways. Okay, so I would do this. And then I would softly wipe both sides. And then I would probably move down to the base and brush that and then wipe it and then move to the sides. So you just kind of, when you glaze, whether it's a piece of furniture and you work like a drawer at a time or a side or the top or a chair, just kind of pick sections and work your sections, and it's easier to do that way. And then once you have that glaze on, everything's covered, you can just take a cloth like this and you ball it up. Like I'm not going to just keep it and you know, wipe it off in streaks. I like to just ball it up and keep all those hard edges in my hand. And then I just softly kind of pat my surface and I let that glaze stay back. So it leaves that nice black. This will bite into different cracks and crevices. It kind of finds its little ways where it wants to tuck in, and it's pretty against the metallic color. Okay, so I'll do it on this side. And if you want more of that off, then you could just pat it a little more firm or wipe it a little bit. But I like it how it just kind of sits on there and gives it like an old. So you can kind of see the difference how this is a little bit lighter, that's got a little bit of black, plus it'll pop the black that came through the base. And with this, you know, you might want like a little dry brush, you know, handy, you know, with these kind of openings where it is going through. If you had anything that's left behind, what you don't want is like a big drip, because when it dries, it is going to look like very black, like a hardened drip, and then that kind of doesn't look as nice as it could look if you kind of give it a once over. And for those, you could just bounce a dry brush and make those go away. Okay, so that would be the glazing of the chair, and then when you got this done, you would let these dry. I would actually let them dry a couple days before I would put any kind of sealer on them, but then they are going to require a sealer, especially if they're going outdoors. You could use that indoor-outdoor sealer we talked about last week. You know, you could use a poly for that matter, oil or water-based. You're not going to have to worry about ambering on this color, and your chairs would be good to go, and we would do the table the same way. We're going to go to a commercial break, and when we return, we're going to do a fun little project on the glass table that matches this set.
My name is Cheryl Steinhurst. My husband and I are owners of Steiny's Tavern. We're located on the northwest corner of 25 Mile and Shelby Road. We offer a unique dining experience from our restaurant to our off-site catering. Everything we make is from scratch. We utilize Michigan-made products whenever possible. We're open 7 days a week. We offer daily lunch and dinner specials, and we carry the most craft beers on draft in all of Macomb County. So plan on coming out to Steiny's Tavern, where you come for the food and stay for the party.
Hi, we're back at Shelby DIY, and we're now going to do just a little demo on this glass top of this table that matches the set. Of course, the base hasn't been done yet, but the glass top, I had gotten this idea a couple years ago at the first store where I acquired a table, and I took some of the nicer stencils that we have that are thicker, and I used that same thick paint and did a all-over stencil on the glass, and it turned out really, really cool, different. And we had, I don't know how many people that wanted to buy the table, and I never wanted to sell it because it was a great piece that could inspire people. So I wanted to do the same thing on this table, and this time I did it in the black instead of the brown because the chairs will have that black, the hint of the black coming through. And the nice thing about this is if somebody purchases it, because this one will be, we'll put this one out, and they don't want the dimension on top, this could just be flipped over and then they can see the black through, and it can still be clear. But I'll tell you, we've had this same thing on a table out in the store. It's been at least 3 or so years now, and I did not even put a top coat on this. And when this paint dries and it hardens up good, we clean over it, we Windex our towel, we wipe it, and it's not coming off. I mean, we'll get the gentlemen in the back that sit at the chairs, and you'll see them trying to pick it off because they don't believe that it's going to bond like that, and it does. So the big key with this is an all-over stencil, and it's about this size, so obviously it's going to take more than one to do this whole table. When you use the thick paint and we're going to scrape it through, you have to do one at a time and let it just air dry. So this is like I do one a day and then it sits, and then tomorrow I'll come back and I'll figure out where the rest of it goes, and then I'll do another one, because the stencil is going to kind of sit back over some of the design, and you're gonna mush the pattern. The nice thing I like about this stencil, this is from Caramel Colors. They don't have a lot of stencils in their stencil category, but their stencils come on a backing. They call them sticky back stencils. And what it is it's got an actual adhesive built into the stencil, which is pretty cool. Now, for glass, it works great. If I'm using it on furniture, what I do is I kind of stick it down on, you know, the dry parchment paper first a couple times so that it's not so tacky that it's going to pull my new freshly painted surface if I was going to do a stencil on a painted surface. But for glass and mirrors and stuff like that, this is awesome because when it goes down, it stays put, and you can clean the stencil and you get a lot of uses out of it where that tackiness comes right back. You just put it back on the lining when it dries. So what I would do here is I would find on stencils, it'll show these little marks where they're going to be guides to show you where your pattern has to line up, and I would try to find where my little old pattern went, and he follows the little guides, and then I lay this right back down, and the rest of it hangs over the glass, okay? And then I'm going to get my thick paint, and I like the little bendy credit cards, and I'm just going to go right over here, and I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to glide, and I'm not going to go back over it because I don't want to push it. And the extra that's staying on top will get off once we move the stencil. Okay, so the key is make sure you have enough on this. And then you just go down your whole pattern. I think one thing people do when they're doing these kind of stencils is they think that they have to clean this part off, and you don't have to. You can do that once the stencil is removed. And I'm going to go right to the edge. Okay, and some of it will be higher, some of it will be lower, and that's kind of the beauty of it. It doesn't all have to be even. But the stickiness on the back of the stencil is an amazing benefit for a project like this. And you know, the older your stencil gets, this was the first time I used this new one. When I did the one yesterday, I used an older one that we've used a number of times. And you know, you start to lose the adhesion a little bit, and you will get a little bit of bleed. No big deal. You can just take a razor blade when it dries, or you can get like a little pencil eraser and kind of go through, and you just get up what bled in between. Now once this is done, I'm just going to lift straight up. Okay, and then I can see that my pattern looks like it's just going right off the edge. Now here, I actually still have bleed, even though I had that stickiness, if you can see. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just wait till it's pretty much set up, and then I'll just use a little razor blade on that. And then I would take this back to a flat surface, and I would scrape that extra paint off, and that's how I'll get it off. And I'll save it. Of course, I'll reuse it. Okay, and then you would want to wash your stencil right away, or in the least, put it in like a tub of water where you can soak it. One thing that'll just really shorten the life out of reusing your stencils is if you don't properly take care of them and clean them, because once these paints get on here and they start to dry, you know, they really don't want to come off, and then you start to bend the elements on your stencils. The one thing I did want to point out with this, when you're doing this thick, you know, material through stencils, you know, these are like store-bought ones that are local. They're great. They're pretty affordable. But the problem is they're really thin and flimsy, and you're not going to be able to get a good clean reveal. So don't use thin stencils. We carry like this kind here. I wouldn't even use this for the thick because they bleed too much. So there are certain stencils that I'll think, yeah, I'm going to use it, and it works great with like a thicker relief. These are thicker. These work great. They don't have to be sticky back. These were meant for thick plaster, thick paint mediums. Awesome. I mean, you're going to save yourself a lot of grief if you use something like that. Okay, and then just do one at a time till your pattern's done. Now, the one last thing I'm going to say is here there's a little bit of sizing that was set up. If you want to make your little pattern kind of cutesy, you can take your stencil back when it's all done, and you can just kind of lightly lay it back over where it was. Okay. Oop, went this way. Oop, no, it didn't. Okay, so let's say I do it right here. And you can take a little bit of a sticky size, which we've used before when we did like leafing and foiling. Okay, and you can just add a little bit onto the tips of your design. If you try to do that and the stencil isn't around it, you're going to get it on your glass, and then you're going to have a mess. Okay, but you can do that if you want to add a little bit. And then when that sets up, which only takes a few minutes, you know, you can take like those foils that we used, or even the gilding leaf that we did on the pumpkins, and you can put it right down on your design. Give it a good little scrape. Okay, and you can pop it, and you got a nice pretty little, I don't know if you can see that from you can be able to pick that up later, but it'll kind of dress it up a little bit and make it extra pretty and dainty. Okay, so you could do anything you want over that, but that's not going to change the fact that that paint bonds like cement onto the glass, and you're going to have a nice finish when it's done. So this was the table, doing the glass, doing a cool stencil if you want to dress it up. The chairs, if you're going to paint over metal and they're clean and new, you shouldn't have a problem. Use any kind of the paints that we have that go over surfaces, and go from there. If you want to layer it, put a top coat on it. If you have metal and it's old and it's got other finishes on it, you really need to take a look at it and don't think that there's not going to be some sanding. Get anything off that's a bad fit. Clean it properly before you start your project. Hope you enjoyed today's show and that it helps you with some of your future projects, and we'll see you next time at Shelby DIY.